This video is not brought to you by Celsius, but maybe we'll have that Jocko fuel on here soon.
Come on, Jocko. Drop the sponsorship.
Man, this is dope. There's some absolute hammers in there. What are you most excited about with P&L?
Might take a pic afterwards, flick up for the camera.
What up? Hey, what's up? Coach Jake, we're back here with the Cladcast. We are off the mat, but on the air. Shout out to my man MJ for that. Hey, we're back today talking about all the things. Coach MJ, what's up?
What's going on? How you doing?
Everything is good, dude. We are both crushing the Celsius here. This video is not brought to you by Celsius, but maybe we'll have that Jocko fuel on here soon. Be brought to you by Jocko or somewhere else. Who knows? But right now, Celsius.
Come on, Jocko. Drop the sponsorship.
Hey, speaking of Jocko, the podcast that he did with Bo Nickel is fire. That is one of probably my top 3 podcasts I've ever listened to. If you haven't heard it, you should listen to it after this one. But he's Jocko Fuel, all other things. Also, sponsors of the P&L. So we are headed in a couple days to Chicago. By the time this comes out, we'll probably be on the road to Chicago for our P&L preseason national championship. That's fire. And then after that, P&L is Premier National League. We're really excited about that. Glad to be in it this year, like really first full year. They kind of had like a beta test year last year, but man, it's dope. There's some absolute hammers in there. What are you most excited about with P&L?
Yeah, like you said, the hammers. I think there's 4 different athletes who competed in Who's Number One that are going to be there. So yeah, it's a lot of good competition, a lot of good mat time.
That magic word, mat time, magic. So the thing one of the things I love the most about it is that you're surrounded by like the real dudes. This is guys that have been doing this for 15, 20 years. Everybody there's pretty much got 20 years in the game. And so they've kind of are all arrived at like, hey, there's a better way to do this. And that's what the P&L is. It's a better version of all things. And it's just a first class experience, first class wrestling, first class experience, first class people. It's all above the line. There's no like, we're not going to fight each other after we wrestle. They can fight, wrestle to the death, whistle to whistle. But when it's done, you don't have to hug him, but you're going to shake his hand and act like a man and have some honor, So
might take a pic afterwards, flick up for the camera.
What up? That's right. So today, we've been talking a lot about this. Our kind of mantra here, training matters. We've just been going back and forth on all the things. Really, the birth of Ironclad is that we just like weren't real happy with I'll say we're not real happy with the way wrestling gets done by default, and so we want to do things intentionally, right? Whether that be the way that you coach, the way you communicate, the way you set up a club, the way you when and what and how where you compete, and then also like your training, like just being. And so we talk a lot about training intentionally, right? And so deliberate training is this buzzword that, these ideas exist outside of wrestling, right? We're talking about them because of wrestling, and hopefully if you're watching this, you're a wrestling person, but it's going to apply to you if you're not. Everybody talks about the 10,000 hour rule, or a lot of times they'll say the 10-year rule. So Malcolm Gladwell said it takes on average 10,000 hours to become an expert at something. But in Erickson's research, this is crazy fascinating in another book I was reading recently, it cited a lot of the different research, and it took anywhere between like 6,000 and like 26,000 or 27,000 hours of practice to become like the best, to become an expert in this thing. So there was this crazy wide range, and Malcolm Gladwell's thing was like on average it takes 10,000 hours. Erickson popularized and has been literally the godfather of, hey, the quality of what we're doing and training something very intentionally, very deliberately, is going to vary that time. You can spend 6,000 or 26,000 hours. Hey, your pick. It's about the quality of what you do, right? And so we explain that a lot of times, like in work, like, hey, you can be an $8 an hour employee. You can be 8, 18, 80, or $800 an hour employee, right? And you get paid based off of not how hard you're working, but the quality of your time, the quality, how much work you're getting done, right? And so Me and MJ soundboard this everywhere. Like, we travel. We get, dude, all the windshield time. We travel. I don't know how many thousands of miles. We're going to Chicago this week.
Let's go.
We get to talk about all of this stuff on the road. So right now we're training kids, and I mean, we have kids lose, right? Like, kids lose, but we don't see kids lose very often that to someone who's been training less than them. Is that fair to say?
For sure.
Like, I mean, we have kids lose, but little Timmy, it's like, hey, man, he practices twice a week, and that kid is a year-round kid. And little Timmy plays 3 sports and practices twice a week for 4 months a year. You know, like, there's an expectation that he's going to lose. But it's like, hey, but why was it even really competitive? You know what I mean? Just there's quality. There's a difference in quality. So when I was working, so between my junior and senior year of college, I had gotten married. We had a kid on the way, and I needed to make like 6 months. I needed to make a year's worth of money in like 4 to 6 months. Like, that's what I had to do. So I remember like driving home. I was praying about it on the road. Literally, an hour and a half later on a 6-hour car ride, my phone rings, and somebody was offering me a job to make $20 an hour, and I was like, holy crap! Like, I was like, dude, I don't care what we're doing. I'm in. Like, I mean, this is in 2011, I think, 2011. So I was like, yeah, it don't matter what we're doing, I'm in. $20 an hour, got it. They're like, yeah, it'll be overtime. I mean, sometimes it'll be 30 or 40, $50 an hour, but like, I was like, hey, you had me at 20. I'm in. So I was in a desperate situation. It was the best job that I could get. And I worked at the coal mine that summer, right? That summer. And I took the fall semester off, worked there. Awesome experience. I actually like really loved it. In this weird way, I loved it because I was always doing something new and learning. It was just cool. Craftsman idea. But I remember sitting, I was like down, I was digging in this hole, like moving all this coal. So we're digging, uncovering some metal that had to be cut out. And it's like 7:30 in the morning, and I'm drenched. I've soaked through my shirt entirely. My blue jeans are like soaking wet, and there's like sweat. I had gloves on. They had sweated through, and they're just like everything's wet. I'm just drenched, okay? And there's this old man up on the backhoe, and he's got coffee in one hand, cigarette in the other, and he's like, hey, move out of the way real quick. Move out of the way. And I'm just, well, I mean, again, I've been getting after it for 20 minutes, 30 minutes, just, straight doing the work here. And the whole time I'm like looking up at this dude with smoking cigarette, drinking his coffee, and I'm like pissy, like this old man can't dig like this. Like, what's, like, yeah, I'm like beating my chest about it. And I'm thinking, I'm getting tougher right now. My forearms are juiced. Like, I'm thinking about training right now, probably, like, as I'm doing it, right? I'm just like, I'm doing this.
That wrestling mindset.
I'm doing it. Yeah. Like, I'm getting better right now. I was like, yeah, I just remember that feeling. And so he says, hey, hold on one second. Let me help there. And so I move, and this man like puts his coffee down and with his cigarette and just here, without ever spilling coffee, moves a couple levers, and in 30 seconds moved more dirt than I had moved in the last hour. Like, just, and meanwhile, this man is sitting on, again, I'm drenched sweat. My muscles are sore. I've already got my pump in. It's 7:30 in the morning, bro. And this old broken man is making, he's probably making $60-$80 an hour. I'm making 20, and I was thinking, he can't do what I'm doing. And in that moment, when he moved all that dirt, like, as pissy as I was, or whatever thoughts I had in my heart about this guy makes all the money, he don't do anything. Like, when he moved that dirt, I'll never forget. It was like a spiritual experience, bro. I was like, he gets paid for getting work done.
Yeah.
It ain't for how hard you work. He's getting paid for getting work done. And so I had some other experiences by then that shaped me, but that one was a real world thing that helped me understand this value ladder, like, at a totally different level. That was maybe I learned it at a different level that day, and it stuck with me for forever. And so when I think about deliberate training, like, that's what's up, Gosh, it was such a big idea. Like,
yeah, the 8-hour man versus the 80-hour man.
I can still feel it, like, what I felt like that day. I remember exactly where I was, what I was thinking, how, like anything,
Yeah. I remember my sophomore year of college, I was taking this biology class, and I can't remember the exact topic, but I remember my professor, she said a quote, it was like, work smarter, not harder. And in my head, like, I was like, no, you should want to work hard. Like, you should, like, wrestling mindset, like, you got to work hard and grind. And I don't know. Now I, like, look back and I was like, maybe she was right. She knew what she was talking about. But, yeah, I think efficiency is that key. And talking about deliberate training is, like, being efficient. Small little concepts like dominant shoulder, not drilling your single leg to your left side if you're right-handed.
So that's like this whole idea. So let's lean into that. Okay, so whether someone's a wrestler or not a wrestler, or whatever, like work harder is like yeah, like work like you got to be willing to work hard. I think you have to overtrain before you can undertrain. Okay,
For sure.
So like some of these ideas that we're talking about don't seem really complex. You're like, yeah, bro, I get it, but there's depth to what we're talking about. We're talking like it just that lesson spirals deeper and deeper and deeper down the rabbit hole, and then you learn the same thing at a new level, and you're like, whoa, it feels like a whole new revelation, right? Work harder, not smarter. Sure, dude, you got to be able to work hard. Again, you have to overtrain so that you know what overtraining is. Otherwise, you only ever undertrain. You have to step off the ledge. B-Mac told it to me like this. My coach, he said you have to step off the ledge to know where the edge is. Otherwise, you don't know if you're actually close to the edge or not. So you have to overdo it, or otherwise you always underdo it, right?
B-Mac with the good quotes,
Dude,
as always.
He's a samurai, bro. He's a man. So you start wrestling, okay? I mean, we're in a blue-collar, hard-working family. Like, when we started wrestling, the answer is work harder. Like, that's the answer, work harder. Hey, dude, shut up. Quit crying. Work harder. Oh, you lost? Yep, work harder. And so I remember the first, 2, 3, 4, 5 years of wrestling, like, that was obviously the answer. Hey, you just need to work harder. Like, you need to spend more time. You need some more of that magic mat time. Everybody's just saying the word mat time. You just need some more mat time, like, Sure. You need that for a couple years. You just need more immersion. You just need to get in the game.
Yeah.
And you need to work harder. But at some point, like that's not the answer again. Like at some point, or it's not the most valuable answer, right? So for me, this is one of the first time that I really learned that. Okay, because my dad, again, like there was no crying, there was no acting a fool after a match. Never. My dad said, if you embarrass me when you lose, I will embarrass you when you lose. You understand? And the way he said it made me understand that he was going to win.
Strike the fear of God.
Yeah, he really meant it when he said it. I never had to ask him to prove it. Okay, so when I was a junior in high school, I'd wrestled. I'd beaten a bunch of nationally ranked kids. Like I'd done a bunch of things. Okay, and so leading into my senior year, I was getting recruited. Division I schools, like a lot of good things going for me, okay? And I made it to the Super 32 semifinals, okay? And it was the first, I didn't even realize like what a big deal that was at the time, And so I make it to the semis, and I wrestled this kid, it's sort of wild, Jamel Jones. So he's like fighting professionally now and doing all things. I saw he won like the professional, like the PFL or whatever. I think he won $1 million on there. Like, I mean, he was a talented athlete. I've told the story so many times. And if you were there back in the day, you remember the whooping that I took. So it was short periods. And I remember warming up, and I'm like, I'm about to freaking run this dude out of gas. Like, he don't even know yet. This kid from Delaware is about to find out. And long story short, he didn't find out anything. I did, and I found out fast. I think the final score, so he took me down. I like stood up, cut away, turn around, get back in his face, and then he like takes me down again, like even slicker. It was like with less effort, he took me down. And I got up, turn around, cut away, and I'm like, thinking I'm gonna like Iowa style and run this guy to gas. I'm just gonna like just work harder, get tougher, hold position, and like I'm just saying all those things because that was the answer that I had. But inevitably, like he never like the match ended. I think it was like 13-7 or something, and it was all takedown escapes, and it never even really felt like he was trying. Okay, like he was in total control of the match, and in the moment, I was like going back to the well. I was like, "Get your hands on him," like I'm just like talking to myself and talking myself back in the match. Focus here, get your hand, But at some point, like the match ended, and it was just this moment of like, dude, what just happened? Like I remember looking at the scoreboard going, this was like a 4-minute match. It wasn't even 6 minutes. And it was like getting worse as it went on. He wasn't trying. It wasn't taking. And so I got done. By then I'd been wrestling like 5 years, getting after it, like training hard as crap, running up hills, doing, throwing up because I'm working so hard and running hills. And I mean, I did every stupid thing you can imagine to like be tougher and be stronger because I just didn't know what to do. I remember like cutting my grass in July in Alabama without we didn't even have a self-propelled mower. I'm pushing this thing up a hill with plastics and sweats on for no apparent reason. I was just like, I think this will make me tougher. So like I was doing all the crazy, hard, stupid stuff. I got my butt whooped that day, and I thought to myself, that was the first time I thought, that guy knows something that I don't. I don't know what, but he knows something I don't.
He's not working harder.
Like, yeah, that guy is not working harder than me. And I started to think to myself, like, this is not a hard work competition. Like, this is not a who's in the best shape competition. Like, those might be a factor in some matches, but it didn't matter. Like, if we had to, I was in better shape than he was. I might have even been stronger. I was definitely working harder. I was doing all the, like, beat your chest, this is what, I'm an American, by God. This is what I did. Like, bro, whatever it was, that bravado did not help me. And so that was the first time. And I had that experience a couple more times in college and stuff. And so it just made me, as a young man, I got obsessed with, like, I keep saying like, it's going to piss me off. I'm sorry, fans. I got obsessed with the idea of finding the way. And before I knew what deliberate training was, I was trying to discover deliberate training. And then every time I read a new book on it and a new research study, another high-level coach, it just slowly guided this path, to where we are. Every time I learned about a new topic, I understood one independent variable that makes up wrestling. And now I'm crazy passionate about sharing that with people, like how do we teach others? And that's kind of what this podcast is about, right? Like, I think there's a couple of different conversations. So I kind of think about like the parents, like the bleacher talk. There's like a conversation for parents in wrestling. There's locker room talk. That's a conversation for coaches and athletes, but like you're really talking to the athletes, like, or maybe call it the training room, right? There's like that kind of conversation. And then the third room is the coach's office. And there are 3 different rooms where there's 3 different conversations to be had. And so this one is pretty public, and we just want to make people aware that there is a better way. Like, we want to point out the things that are wrong, that, hey, that's unacceptable. You shouldn't be tolerant of your coach acting or behaving that way. What are the morals of wrestling? What is the responsibility of a coach and of a parent? How do we get those things right? So this one is the public conversation, I guess, right, that you could have with parents. And I would love for parents to be watching, consuming this, sharing this with other parents, and having these conversations in the bleachers so that we can raise the standard of what is and isn't allowed, And then with the athletes and coaches, I mean, obviously we have athletes here and all those things that we work with and teach all this stuff too, but we've started this group, and we're trying to do that with the people that want it, the people that need it the most, right? How do we empower people through information, through education, right? Education changes you. And so how do we equip the people who need it or want it the most with the information? And so I think that there's a way to do that with athletes.
Yeah, for sure.
And we've been getting blown up, by coaches on how to do that. And so we're trying to do more and more of that stuff now.
So, we've been talking about this, you've been sharing with me this idea of creating this elite training group, Ironclad Elite. And I've heard you talk about this 22-hour rule. Can I just like talk about that and then explain like what that means, like in regards to like online training?
So, I don't remember where I got introduced to this idea at. Again, probably a book. Everybody's obsessing about 2 hours a day. There's 2 hours a day that really, 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 really matter to me. Okay. So if you're a wrestler, it's your 2 hours of practice. If you're an adult that's trying to get in shape, you're obsessing about what you do in the gym, right? I think gym is a pretty obvious thing. Whether you're
Yeah.
non-athlete or an athlete, you're obsessing about the 2 hours a day. But that only represents, that's 1/12 of your day. Like we're all obsessing and fighting over the 2 hours. But what about the other 22? How do I equip and empower myself in the other 22 hours to improve? Because the margins, like how do you beat somebody in this 2 hours? Like the margins on that are just so razor thin, right?
Yeah.
Like in 2 hours, if we run a 10-yard sprint, okay, and MJ, you're a lot faster than me, but in a 10-yard sprint, how much are you going to beat me by?
Yeah.
But if we run a 100-yard sprint, like, bro, you're going to beat me by a lot. A lot. You know what I'm saying? It's going to show up more because of the other 90 yards. You know what I'm saying? And so a lot of people are crazy lazy in that area. I heard, Jordan Burroughs said he thinks that the greatest frontier for wrestling across the board is in nutrition. And I think that that's a huge component. But I think what he might say this differently, but I think what he's really pointing to and what the idea he's getting right is that it's the things outside of practice, right? It's the other 22. So there's the 2 and the other 22, and we've got to work on how do we improve ourselves and equip our athletes, coaches, parents, all. How do we get better the other 22 hours a day, right? So I think that comes from ideas, concepts, from belief. Like if you can find these independent variables, there's all these components of wrestling and grappling. Okay, well, nutrition, recovery, like self-talk, right? Confidence, belief, film study, stretching, mobility, strength conditioning. Like how do we get all those things right? Relationships, communication, academics. Like what is the way in all those areas? How do we get all these different things dialed in? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then how are those things related? Like, are they important? You know what I mean? Are they important?
So Real Woods, I saw he posted this on Instagram. This sport isn't easy, but when it becomes a lifestyle, it can make everything else easy. And just that idea of like wrestling becoming a lifestyle, we talk a lot about like champion decisions, and it's not just the 2 hours that you're practicing. Everybody's getting that 2 hour practice. Everybody's doing that. What do your decisions look like outside? Like what time you going to bed? What time you waking up? Like, are you getting your schoolwork done? And it's all these, like you were talking about, these compounding elements that if we're sprinting 10 yards, it doesn't show up. But if you're doing this a year consistently, like it's huge. It's an insane difference.
So, that's lifestyle. Let's lean into that word. Okay. So all these kids have been preached to, like they've heard the right thing to do, right? They've heard the right thing. Okay. And I think that translates everywhere, right? And so my wife and I have this conversation all the time. She's a physician, and she's dealing with people at the end of their life, and they've made this small bad decision every day for 30 years, right? And it wasn't ever a problem, but man, they've been doing it for 20, 25, 30 years, and now they find out that they've got cirrhosis of the liver. And actually they have all these other health problems too. Like it's not a problem until it's a problem. And then when you realize it, there's actually a whole host of problems that come from it. So that's the compound effect, right? And so the compound effect can be from doing positive things or it can be doing negative things, right? What is the compound effect of eating quality food? Like, well, it's a lot. It's a whole lot. So connecting all these things, like, it's about belief, right? We keep coming back. It's about belief. We don't have a discipline issue to eat healthy food or to not drink too much or to whatever. Like, it's a belief thing. And so education gives us the information. It gives us the facts. It tells us, right? It guides us. And then if we believe that information, like, that's everything. So the thing that I hear the most out of kids is they say, oh, it doesn't affect me or whatever else. Well, like, look, the kid that's 12, 15, 17, 20, I don't care. Hey, I'm 35, or 34, however old I am. Like, hey, I've been using my body enough. I know when it's working and not working correctly, okay?
Yeah.
I don't have crazy high levels of HGH in my body. When you're 17 and your HGH and your T levels are through the roof, maybe you can get away with some of that stuff. But I really think the bigger effect is that when those kids are young, they don't know when their body's working and not working correctly, right? So when you get your first car at 16, you're just thrilled you got a car, bro. You're like, dude, I got a car, I have this freedom, I got all these things. And so you're like, dude, this is awesome, Mom, Dad, thanks, this is the greatest. And then, like, a couple weeks in, you realize, like, man, the CD player don't work so much or whatever, right? Like, at least that's what it was like when I was a kid. You had a CD player. Now it's all the other things. Like, hey, sometimes the Bluetooth doesn't work. Or sometimes, like, hey, this mirror doesn't adjust right. Or, hey, my seat's got, like, a weird spring in the back of it. Whatever. Like, you just start figuring out things that are wrong. It's got a scratch on it, a dent here. And as you get familiar with the thing, you start to understand when it's working, not working. All of a sudden, you're like, you feel in the pedal that I don't think this is accelerating correctly. Or you hear a little tick in the engine. You become conscious and aware the longer you have the vehicle because you know how it operates. And so your body is a tool. It's a vehicle just like a car. And so you start to understand and learn when it's working correctly and incorrectly. And once you know, then you know it's a big deal, right? When you realize that when you don't know anything about brake pads, you're trying to stop and the car's not stopping good and you hear metal on metal scrubbing and you're like, oh my gosh, like, Mom, something's wrong with my car, Dad.
Yeah.
And then when you're, 34, you hear a little squeak and you go, it's about time to go and change those brakes.
For sure, yeah.
And so you don't know till you know, what I mean? You don't know till you know. And so circling all that back, I think that is true everywhere. If with enough information on this topic, and it's 2023, man, you can learn anything and everything. Like, there's so much information available. How can I get a coach and fast track that process? You know what I'm saying? It's just like, dude, it's so crazy. It's so crazy how there's so much information. Like, literally, when you find something out, when you learn a new thing and it guides the way, it guides the path, it can be so empowering. And then you feel stupid that you didn't do it right, So I just hired this business coach guy, this consultant, and he's helping us with a bunch of things. And I told him, like, when he started showing me the things that he could do and what and why and all the reasons behind him, he's like my coach now, right? I was like, oh my gosh. I said, dude, where were you 90 days ago? Like, I needed you 90 days ago. Man, this would have solved every problem that I had. And he was like, hey, man, that's how it is. Like, you just learn. You do it the wrong way and you learn. And those are the lessons if you're a business owner, right? If you're a business owner out there, you know exactly what I'm talking about. But those same things in training. And so what's crazy, and the reason MJ and I get fired up because we'll be at a tournament and you watch some kid lose a clutch moment in a match. You're like, bro, if he knew this little detail, like he had it. He just didn't know. Like,
I'm thinking of a few matches right now.
And so you go, man, what's that worth to, like, have that answer and win in that moment and get your hand raised and, like, be the guy? Like, what would that lead to? It becomes this butterfly effect thing where if this one thing happens, it's so easy to do that in hindsight, right? But, bro, what if he did do that thing differently and all of a sudden he wins and now he has this self-belief and this confidence because he's a champion and he sees himself differently than a guy that I set out on this goal and I won. I had success, not I set out on this goal and I didn't make it. I didn't accomplish it and it sucks. All of a sudden, like, it's like they're two very, like, divergent roads, because there's this natural process. We talked about this with Nakaya. We've been talking about with all of our athletes when we sit down and have classroom sessions or in private lessons where the first time you lose, you say, that sucks, man. It sucks that happened. The next time you lose, you're like, hey, this kind of sucks. Like, yeah, this definitely sucks. It becomes a little closer to you.
Yeah.
And then eventually it becomes internal and you say, I suck. And, like, that's the worst thing. It's the opposite of what we want to be doing, right? What we should be empowering kids and giving them self-confidence. And if we don't equip them correctly or help them understand just that, the very nature of that, it internalizes and becomes this negative thing, which is a reason that I think a lot of people can't handle that and they get off the bus. They don't get coached up on how to handle that on the sports psych portion of it, perhaps.
For sure.
Man, it's just like this crazy thing. It's to me, it's so wild.
Mm-hmm.
Again, you get this end of life clarity where if you've been doing this a long time, you all of a sudden you get really particular. Like I think I'm a total snob about the way wrestling gets taught and coached and the way it gets communicated and what you're doing, because I'm like, hey, we're getting off the line a little bit. Let's get back online. Here's the way. Because being off an inch here is not a big deal. You're off an inch, but down there you're 50 feet, and down there you're 50 yards, and down there you're 5 miles.
Yeah.
And so, hey, just as quickly as we can, gently. Hey, let's pull it back here on the line. Let's make sure we do that right. And so, I'm a total snob about it, because when it's done well, I think that wrestling is the greatest thing ever for kids, man. It's the greatest thing ever for young people. I think it should be required, right? It's like all the things that people want for their kids exist on a mat, but you really need a mentor, you need a coach, you need someone to guide them. And a lot of people got great coaches. They already got a great coach. He's teaching the techniques, teaching all the things, but those ideas guide you. They help reframe your mind and point you in the right direction. So big, man. It makes me think of maybe I'm bridging a gap. My brain kind of does this. Okay, so I don't know if this is a direct flow for anybody watching this, but like there's in college I was taking all these ethics classes. I was just obsessed. Had a really cool professor too, and we talked about Plato. Okay, and so Plato, student of Socrates, and Plato had this idea he called the Allegory of the cave. And so there's a video of us talking about this really in depth online somewhere already. I remember us talking about this at when we were up at Newberry doing some stuff with their athletes at Newberry College. But the Allegory of the cave is this idea of that people are so it's a hypothetical world, right? Where people are born into a chair and they're confined. I'm gonna pull my mic with me. Fresh mics. What's up?
There we go.
They're confined in this chair and they're looking at the wall in front of them, right? And they can't look left or right, whatever else. All they see is the wall in front of them, and their whole life exists right here. Okay, they can't see anything behind them. Then one day they wake up and they see like this like shadow thing, this character that's moving, right? And they see it and they're like, if you're confined, you're like, what is that thing? And this thing that you see moving is real. It's moving. But this person behind me is throwing shadow puppets up on the wall, whatever. I feel like I'm throwing gang signs. I'm like, what? They're throwing shadow puppets up, and then they start making noises. Well, you don't see the person behind you. You don't see the real thing. You just see this, your perspective of it on the wall. So you see the puppet, you hear the sound, and you associate that thing with being the thing that is real and makes it sound like that's a dog to you, that's a bat, that's a butterfly, that's a bird. Until one day you wake up and you're unbound, you're not confined, and you turn around and you're like, oh my gosh, what's going on? You're
There's so much more.
So confused, and so you're like, what is all this? And then as you move towards it, right, it actually, as you would move, so you're in the back of a cave and been in darkness, as you move towards the light, it would actually be painful. You'd literally be like shielding yourself from the pain of learning new information, quite literally, until you're standing at the opening of the cave. And it looks like the scene in The Lion King, like you're looking at, you're out here on the rock or whatever. And so all of a sudden there's all this new information, and then you have to decide, wow, there's all this out there in the world. Am I going to like go out into the world and risk failing, or am I going to go back to safety back there in the thing?
With what you know and what you're comfortable with.
Yep. And so, look, man, if you go out there, you're going to have to make your own spear and learn how to build fire. And there's things you have to learn, and it's
probably going to mess up a few times.
You're going to mess up a bunch of times, But ultimately, you're living a true life. Mm-hmm. Whereas the person back there, there's a real limit on what they can and can't do because they're unwilling to, they're not open-minded.
Yeah.
There could be something more than what it is that they know, right? Mm-hmm. So you don't know till you know. And when you find out, like that business coach, shout out to Coach Mike, it's just such an expensive thing to not know the answer to. You're like you would give anything to have known that answer just a little bit before, because it would have really changed, you know. I think, what would I have done with all this information as an athlete, right? And so we're just obsessed with becoming the coaches that we wish that we had.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I had some amazing coaches, some amazing men, amazing leaders. I learned something. They were all incredible at something, and I learned all those different components. But I wish that somebody had given me the answers that we're trying to give to people, because ultimately, hey, whoever's willing to do the work wins.
For sure.
If you have the information and you're willing to do the work, then you win. You know, if you're not willing to do the work, then the person who is willing to do the work does win. But without all of the information, doing all the work or the most work does not necessarily mean lead to success.
Yeah.
You know? And so it's just this kind of this crazy idea.
Yeah, I liked what you said about how you had a bunch of like different coaches, and you took bits and parts of like what they taught you to create your own, and kind of scaffold it and stacked it upon knowledge you already had. And I feel like, I don't know, some athletes or coaches maybe watching this, maybe if they're hesitant, you don't have to abandon everything you already know. Like this is just
totally.
This is just other answers that you stack what you know and your experience, and like you were talking about, you have these different constraints that you find, and it evolves into this new style. What's maybe something really profound? I know you've traveled all over the globe and talked to some of the best wrestling minds on the planet. Like what's like a specific moment, like a light bulb moment that you just like, I got to start doing this. I got to be more deliberate about this.
Oh man, dude, there's so many things. So, here's a huge thing that I felt in high school. I'll say this. I felt this in high school that same year. So I lost in the state finals as a junior in high school, won as a senior or whatever. And that Super 32 semifinal match was like the halfway point between one season and one state final and the next, right? The way the calendar falls. And so we would get up and run. We ran all the time in high school. Like we would run 2 miles and then like 20 sprints every day, like at 6 a.m. We'd meet at 6 a.m., run 2 miles. And so I was a 189 pounder, and like I could run 2 miles in 12 minutes, which was like, I mean, kind of good for a 17, 18-year-old,
for sure,
you know, that weighs 190 pounds, right? So could run sprints, do all things. I mean, I could just run well for a big guy, which you don't usually see. And I was always running and pushing myself harder and faster and harder and faster and harder and faster. But then in matches, I would get tired, and I couldn't figure out why I was tired.
Yeah.
I was like, I'm not breathing hard, but I'm tired. Like, and I didn't understand. Something about it didn't feel right. And I couldn't express it. And so when I started learning, I had the good fortune of meeting and becoming friends with Sean Buck and his business partner, who are the owners of Level Method. And I learned all about the like multiple energy systems, right? And so like to me, the whole strength conditioning component is this crazy thing that there's a lot of systems out there. There's CrossFit and Suplays and band training. I guess Dopamino is like the popular one now. There's, I mean, dude, you name it. There's like standard strength conditioning. There's like what you're going to say, like football stuff. There's fascia-based training. There's the stuff that functional patterns. Like there's so many things out there, and I think all of them get something like right intentionally or accidentally, but they're not doing it right intentionally. They're not getting it right deliberately. There's components that all of them miss, right? So we've put a whole bunch of that together in the strength conditioning thing. So learning about the multiple energy systems was like a thing that, man, if I had just understood that, I would have won. Like that would have been huge, right? There were other breakthroughs like, hey, this isn't a skills test, it's a wrestling match.
For
like
sure.
it's a points competition with a pin that trumps all the points, right? Like, so learning how to compete, that was like a whole nother thing. There's learning about nutrition, learning about sports psychology, learning about match planning. Like, what is that? Learning what visualization is. What is that? Like, not this fairy tale, whatever thing that people talk about. Like how do you like practically apply that? You know, we got a kid who who had not won. He had never beaten. I think he was 0-5 against a kid career, and he beat the kid in the state finals this year. Won a state title, and over a kid who's a Fargo finalist. Like this kid was a Fargo runner-up, but he didn't win the state title. He lost to another kid on our team who had never beaten him before.
Yeah.
And he swears to no end that it was all 100% the visualization stuff that we were doing, right? Like, to me, that's profound, right? And, dude, by the way, the kid that he beat is awesome. Love the kid. Awesome, great kid, hardworking. He's the man. Fargo runner-up, okay? But there's something else. How did Clark Box beat him? Like, he did something right. You know what I mean? So, I don't know, man. I guess I just kind of started running with that idea, but there's so many things. It's never ending. There's so many things. And whether you're an athlete or a coach, like, again, they're different conversations. Like, the things that an athlete needs or the things a coach needs are different, you know?
Yeah.
And one of the things that I think is a real frustration for me is that we're like creating, like, this is a very blue ocean. Like, nobody's in this space in the wrestling world, and no one thinks that it's necessary or that there's an answer to it. But, like, there is. And, in fact, we've had people reaching out to us asking these questions, and we're doing stuff with them, whether they get in our monthly elite program as an athlete or a coach, or if they schedule one-on-one time, right, that where with our availability, and we do this one-on-one. Like, those things are all a possibility, and we're doing it right now. But it seems like such a foreign space. Like, no one even knows that there's a solution to that problem, to the problems that they kind of feel or suspect, or, like, I think there's just something more. I've plateaued, or I'm looking for the next thing. There's no one knows where to find that answer. But it's crazy to me because in, like, jiu-jitsu, for instance, where there's I like to look at jiu-jitsu because there's athletes seek the best information anywhere and everywhere, period. All they care about is getting better because they're trying to win world titles. And then, but also a lot of those guys that are athletes also run a gym, or they've got a coach who runs a gym.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of business to business consulting stuff which would in the wrestling world would look like us helping a high school or a college coach or a club coach, like helping them with their business. Hey, how do you structure this thing? How do you do these things? And there's networks like that in the jiu-jitsu community where they care about the exact same things that we care about inside the wrestling space. Like, this is a very common thing in that industry, but you move it just a half a lane over into wrestling, and people are like, I don't think they need help, don't want help, or are too prideful to ask for help. Or they want help, but they, like, won't pay for help. And you're like, bro, what? I mean, I don't know what to tell you.
Yeah.
You know? So crazy. Just a fascinating thing. And I think it's something that we've got to really change. I mean, I talked to Mike Mal. Talked to him a great deal about that. We were doing a bunch of stuff with the P&L. I mean, you're in the middle of all that. And I was kind of pitching him. I was like, dude, I know this is it. I was like, well, I've already started doing this a little bit, but I was like, we want to do this at scale. We want to do this with a lot of people and really help, because there's such a need. Like, there's such a need. There's just such a need. I can't stress it enough.
So, yeah, you're talking about just like the classroom settings with Clark Box. What did those sessions look like? Like, were you on the mat, or like what happened inside that session?
Dude, sit down in a classroom. You can do it sitting right here in this room. We do it online. Like, there's so many ways to do it. You can, like, if it was literally one-to-one, you could just about FaceTime and do it, right? Like, but do it online, and it's literally just, it's a notebook, it's pen and paper, it's a classroom, it is a lecture. You know what I'm saying? And there's depth to the things that you're learning. When I think of what we're talking about, it's a sermon. It's a sermon on a topic. That's it. It's no different than going to church, right, or your small group or whatever. It is a sermon on wrestling. And if you're the pastor of a church, it's like, hey, what do I need? What am I delivering this week? Like, hey, here's what I've been studying. Here's the best news that I have to share with you this week. And it's what I think everybody needs.
Yeah.
Like at our church, people say, hey, I would love to hear a message on A, B, and C. And the pastor puts together some stuff because that's what everybody needs. And hey, at some point, we're going to cycle back around. We're going to talk about the same topic again, but we're going to talk about it from a different perspective. So today we're talking about it this way, and next time we're going to hit it from this angle.
Yeah.
So it's the same truths with a different perspective, and you get a totally different understanding of the same thing. You know what I mean? I always tell people, like, you can look at a penny and it's like, it's a penny, it's worth 1 cent. I know a lot about it. But if we all sit around that thing and look at it, we get a different perspective on it. So like, I'm like, hey, this thing has, it's tails. And you're like, it's not tails, it's definitely heads. I'm looking at it, it's heads. And I'm like, but somebody over there, it's like this skinny thing that's this big, it's not round. It's narrow. And so when we talk about a truth in wrestling, whether that be whatever the different, all these independent variables that you can train, your pace, your strength conditioning, your flexibility, mobility, infinite numbers of positions, techniques, skills. There's all these different components. The communication factor, like you can talk about that same conversation. You can talk about that same topic over and over and over again. And it's not like, oh, I already know about communication. Like, there's mastery, there's depth to that conversation.
Yeah.
Right. You have to move on from your early understanding of what a chicken wing or an arm bar is and start seeking mastery of the position, of the technique, of the skill. What are the deeper ideas about it? And so to me, all of this is about serving the needs that coaches, athletes, parents have, but it's about having an ongoing conversation about it, right? The word sermon is what comes to mind, because that's what it is.
Yeah, I love that idea of just having an open dialogue, just about finding these wrestling truths, like these truths or theories, and they're meant to be tested over and over and over. And you talk a lot about the T chart, and so that can kind of stop coaches or maybe competitors from sharing information. Kind of just explain the T chart and kind of like how does this like put an end to that?
Okay, yeah. So T chart. So the T chart is an idea. When we were first starting to do this, I was trying to figure out, why don't they want the answers? Like, what? I don't understand. Like, there's just this dynamic that was going on all around me all the time, and I couldn't understand it. So the T chart is like, there's a ladder. Okay, so you when you come into wrestling, you don't know anything. You're at the bottom of the ladder, and there's people that like have been in wrestling a long time. They're veterans, whatever else, seasoned experts, you name it. Okay, they're at the top of the chart, and so wrestling is crazy because people are so willing to help. Here, right? These people are like, hey, I don't know what I'm doing, and they'll ask, and this person helps, and they're happy to share information down the ladder, okay? Until, like, eventually this person's getting a little better, and the gap between them is narrowed, okay? And so one of two things happens. This person thinks that they're higher than they are, and so they no longer want to ask this person for help, or this person doesn't think they need help, right? They think this gap is this wide, but it's this wide. So this person is like, hey, let me help you. And bottom person, new person goes, yeah. And they start giving them the yeah answer.
Like, I got it.
Yeah. I understand. I already knew that. Okay. and you're going, hey, you don't, I know that you don't know.
Yeah.
Right. Like, you're thinking the Dunning-Kruger effect, right? They come in, they're really good. And then they start to fall off again. And it's like, hey, maybe there's more to this than I thought. And then eventually you're like, I don't think I know anything about this. And then later on you're like, okay, I think I'm starting to figure this thing out. But it's like, that's several years into this thing. You know what I'm saying? So a person way over here on the right, 10, 15, 20 years in, is going, hey, bro, you're actually not there at all, right? And so what happens is this person either stops asking or stops wanting your help, okay? Or if they actually climb the ladder, then they kind of come up here beside you and they become a peer. And now you stop wanting to share information because there's a fear that if I give you all of my best information, like, I don't mind helping you some, but if I give you my best information, you might jump me and actually be above me in the hierarchy, right? So as you become a peer and you're somewhere on the same playing field, people there's a little sharing information, but maybe not the best stuff, especially if we're competing against each other regularly. Because again, I don't want you to move above me, because you don't return the favor. And so pride is the number one. Pride and competitiveness.
Yeah, I was about to say ego.
Ego.
Sure.
It really kind of boils down to ego. It becomes this thing that stops the sharing of ideas and communication and whatever. And so, there's kind of two people, right? Like, there's like scarcity mindset and growth mindset. And so my biggest fear for a long time, while we didn't do and share and give all these and give these ideas to people, was, number one, I wanted to know, like, I had a little bit of imposter syndrome, I think, of like, hey, maybe there's just so much more to this than I even am like conscious of. And I kept asking other people, and everyone that I asked that I thought knew more about this thing would be like, that's the first I've heard of that. Like, I don't know, man. I think you're telling me. Like, let's keep talking about it. I'm super interested. When I realized that other people didn't know what I was like talking about, and I was sharing with them, I was like, okay, wait a minute. Maybe we are further up the ladder than I thought. Yeah, dude. So this whole thing started. I mean, really, we just decided we would come on camera and talk about this because number one, we were trying to shoot a promo. We were going to shoot like an ad. Like, hey, how do we clip up and tell people what we're doing and why we're doing it and why it's so important? And honestly, it just didn't feel right. I mean, is that fair to say? Like, it just felt...
It's a lot of compounding ideas that's hard to explain within a 60-second ad. So definitely I feel like the long-form podcast content was the way to go.
I think those that know me know that I can be long-winded. So, it is what it is. But I just... it doesn't feel like... I mean, I don't want to just shoot little ad commercial things. That doesn't feel real. It doesn't feel like authentic, And so I think just sharing our story and how we got there and why it's important and how we know it's important and the benefit that we've seen in athletes that like nobody else knows. Nobody else hears that story, that conversation behind closed doors where this idea was just like completely revolutionized. Last thing I'll share is a quote that from The Perfect Pass, and he talks about how they say the ideas behind a play are more important than the details of the play itself. It's the ideas behind the play. And ultimately those ideas behind plays became what allowed run pass options, back shoulder throws, like the mesh stuff, like all these ideas that exist now in football that just completely changed things. This past week, Bill Belichick put a defensive player in motion who ran in and blocked a freaking field goal attempt. Like the idea behind something is more important than the play itself. Like that's where innovation really comes from, and we're experimenting with that every single day on the mat, whether it be wrestling or jiu-jitsu. Our brother's doing it here with MMA stuff, and so we see the value of it at the very highest level, and we want to share that with the people who are seeking those answers, right? Whether you're an athlete or a coach. And so if you jive with that, if you are interested, if you want to, hit us up. You can contact our team, 205-793-6089. Hit us up. Our team will take you through. They'll get some questions answered and kind of take you through the application process. And if you want in, like, we will put you in, But you don't have to be qualified. You don't have to have these accolades. You don't have to have whatever. You just have to have the right mindset. You have to have the right attitude, and you have to become open-minded and eager to learn.
Yeah, leave your egos at the door.
It ain't for everyone, but it could be for anyone, right?
That's right.
Hey, this is the Cladcast, off the mat and on the air, right? So,
yes,
man, listen, fun episode. Just working through ideas. We do this every day. We do this all the time, and so we're trying to share that with the people that jive with us or fans or doing all things out there. Big thank you to our sponsors. We had some very special meetings this past week about some new partnerships and sponsorships potentially. If you're interested, please reach out to us. Lots of cool opportunities there. This thing is a whole lot bigger than us, and it takes something bigger than us to make really a lot of those opportunities possible for our athletes, but we believe in it, so we're going to continue doing the work. Thank you, guys. Love y'all so much. Ironclad fam, y'all are the best. See you. MJ, close us out. Say something.
This is the way.